Well, hello, and welcome to another Design for Living podcast. We've been talking about perfectionism on our last couple sessions. And are you a perfectionist? If you are, if that's something you struggle with, you have probably noticed problems that creates for you in your relationships and your daily life. Have you noticed that? If you're paying attention, that's what perfectionism leads to. We want to look at that today and discover some of the problems and some of the ways to cure and deal with that and to help you with the perfectionism. I'm Dr. John Hawkins Sr., and I'm your host today, and I'm also the president of Gateway Counseling Center, located here in Boynton Beach, Florida. And that's where we're coming to you from. And so today we hope to be able to help you in this area of perfectionism, shame, and how it spreads into other areas of life and our life and creates these problems in our relationships. See, perfectionism spreads. It's like a cancer. It'll move into a lot of different areas of our life. And the perfectionism, it makes genuine connection with others difficult because genuine connection requires vulnerability. And to be able to be vulnerable to other people, they're going to see my imperfection. And I can't allow people to see that. So I'm going to be afraid of vulnerability. So that's going to give me a problem in relationships, particularly close relationships. Because if I'm in a romantic relationship or in a marriage, my partner is going to feel that distance between me and them that's a result of not being vulnerable. They're going to feel not emotionally connected and close to me because the problem is the closer I let someone give to me, the easier it is for them to see my flaws. So I want to try to keep people at more of a distance. And then they'll start to feel like they're carrying the weight of the relationship. They're the one who's working so hard to make this relationship work and connect because they'll feel like I'm trying to be more distant. And then I end up sabotaging the relationship because I'm afraid of being close to somebody, afraid of them seeing my imperfections. At work, it'll create problems, especially if I'm responsible for other people, because I'll find it very difficult to delegate because my feeling will be, well, nobody can do it as well as me. I'm perfect. I'm going to do it perfect. So I'm going to have the control. I'm going to have to be in control of everything because perfectionism requires control. And so other people aren't going to want to work with me after a while because I'll be too unreasonable in what the expectations are. And I'll have a hard time accepting feedback from other people, some positive feedback or constructive criticism, because I'll take that as I'm less than perfect. I'll become defensive about that. And real success will always feel just out of reach for me. I can never quite get there, never quite attain that. And as we looked in last week's broadcast, that tends to produce procrastination or the inability to finish something because it's never quite good enough. If I'm a parent, when it comes to parenting my children, that can create a lot of anxiety in me because that's a huge responsibility, being responsible for this life and growing them up to be a productive human being. So I want to do everything just right. I want to turn out perfect kids, so I got to be a perfect parent. So I'm going to feel this pressure to do everything right. And eventually that starts to come down on the kids. I want to protect them. I don't want it to feel like that, but they'll start to feel like that. And just when it comes to my normal daily life, that's going to produce more anxiety in me, more stress in me, because I'm going to try to do something that's impossible, be perfect. And so it steals my ability to just rest, to just be still sometimes, because that just feels like failure. I'm just sitting there. I'm not doing anything. even though I want to because I feel exhausted. I feel like sitting there. But I get this baseline that I always have to be striving. I always have to be working for something. And so if I don't address the perfectionism, it will take over everything in my life and all these areas in my life. And it'll create strife in every facet of my life, particularly if you're a high achiever. People that are high achievers, and very driven, oftentimes they struggle with perfectionism. They can be professionals, they can be in high performance environments. What they end up doing is celebrating results while ignoring the emotional cost of producing those results. They're more achievement oriented than they are relationship. So these driven people with their perfectionism in their own life makes it very hard to maintain momentum in my life because there's so little satisfaction. I get a project, I get a goal, I go after it, I do all this crazy amount of work. When I achieve it, I can't really enjoy it because it's never quite finished, and I got to go on to the next thing that I'm going to try to achieve. And so achieving goals is not bringing me the satisfaction that I thought it would bring. And so if I want to try to avoid that, there's a few things I need to remember. One important thing is having some self-compassion, for my life. If you're a student, you feel that pressure of what I call grade anxiety. I got to get that GPA. If I'm going to be competitive and getting admission to that college or that school, if I'm going to meet my family expectations, I've got to keep pushing. I've got to keep doing this incredible workload. That's why we see so much anxiety among teenagers today. If I'm an athlete, my sense of self is all wrapped up in my performance. So if I don't perform up to par, up to that perfectionistic level, well, I just feel destroyed. I feel like I'm worthless. So errors feel identity threatened, simple rather than just a simple disappointment. Of course, you're going to be disappointed if you lose. It's always more fun to win than to lose. But to put all that extra pressure on yourself is not going to help you be more productive or win more. And like we said before about the parents, carrying that weight of doing it just right can often come down on the kids, although I'm trying to, in my mind, avoid that. I don't want to feel that pressure, but they watch me, they watch my model, and the thing I'm trying to protect my kids from, I end up inflicting upon them because now they feel like they've got to perform, and they're picking up the perfectionism. In some cases, that can feel like conditional love to them. If I don't achieve all these goals that I feel my parents want me to, then I wonder maybe if they love me. So kind of the bottom line in all this is perfectionism doesn't always look the same in every group, but it can be resolved regardless of the group by understanding where it comes from and working with a counselor to help loosen its hold on your life. So how do I overcome perfectionism and that constant self-criticism that is nagging, condemning me? Well, you have to realize that it's an ongoing practice. It's an ongoing process. It's not a one-time fix. It's not one class I'm going to take, one decision that I'm going to make, one counseling session that I'm going to attend. But I'm going to have to work at it. And I'm going to have some steps forward, and I'm going to have some steps backward. But gradually, as I keep working at it, that inner critic, although it doesn't disappear overnight, as I keep plugging away, it gradually loses its authority in my life. Because What my work produces is an awareness. That's the foundation of healing myself from this, is the awareness. I notice the pattern of my perfectionism. I see what it's doing in these different relationships in my life, in these different areas of my life. And so it all starts with the awareness, just to acknowledge it, to see it, to become aware and say, you know what, I don't like this. And as I become aware and I see it, I'm not going to judge myself for it. I'm not going to come down and condemn myself for having the perfectionism. I'm just going to be aware. And when I catch myself engaging in it, and I start to maybe avoid a task because of the fear of failure, that I'm not going to do it perfect, or I see myself starting to spiral with a self-criticism, I'm simply going to name it. I'm going to say, well, that's my perfectionism again. And I'm going to be honest. Yeah, it's popping back up again. I'm going to ask myself a question. My standards that I'm imposing on myself in this area, are they serving me, or am I serving my standards? You know, if I'm serving my standards and they become the master, and they'll make me less productive. They won't make me better, they'll make me worse. You know, psychologists have done some research on growth mindsets, and that's kind of the opposite of the perfectionist mindset. That's a good thing, you know, to have. And so people with a growth mindset, they see setbacks as information rather than as a verdict, something defective in you. It's just some information, and that builds resiliency in me, and it increases my motivation over time. Resiliency is that ability to bounce back from adversity. It helps me eliminate the fear of failure. It's like, all right, so I go out, I give this a try, I give it my best. If I failed, okay, I failed. I can always try again. I can figure out what went wrong. Do I need to study more, work more, practice more? Or do I decide, you know, I don't think that's an area for me. I don't think I'm exactly designed for that area. I can do whatever I want, you know, with that goal. And the reframe doesn't always come naturally to the perfectionist because they'd rather judge themselves, but it can be learned as I just keep working with my counselor and changing how I think and reframe. Here's a few strategies that you can try in this process. One is what I call the good enough practice, and that's shooting for 80% effort instead of 110%. Now, I know we've heard all our life, you know, whatever you're going to do, give it 100%. Get out there, give it 150%. And I understand what people are saying. But the perfectionist, you know, takes it to extremes. It's not about just give it your best effort. It's like put this unreasonable amount that's impossible. And so for the perfectionists, they need to back up a little bit. They need to shoot for excellence, not perfection. Excellence is doing the best you can with your given resources. And so what you'll find with your 80% effort, and you look at that and say, you know, that's good enough, you'll basically be getting the same results with a fraction of the stress. Other people are going to say, wow, that's wonderful. So try the good enough practice. Another thing you can try is what I call timed work sessions. In other words, have a set window of time that I'm going to spend on this. Whether you want to make it a half hour, whether you want to make an hour, whatever you want to do, whatever time you want to make on it, and then just spend that time rather than zero in on every minor detail. And that's why for the perfectionist, things never get done because they're never good enough. But when you go out there and say, okay, this is how much time I have, you know, I think one of Murphy's law is that work expands to fill the time allotted to it. You know, if I have left time, I got to focus more, and I get it done. Rather than have more time and I'm, you know, dragging it out. The perfectionist will never be done. They'll always, you know, stay at it. And so when you realize, hey, there's a deadline here, there's a time frame here, I have to crank this out, because in real life, that's often how things work. A third thing you can try is externalize the inner critic. In other words, give the critic a name. This is the voice that's in my head that's always condemning me and always criticizing me and telling me I'm not good enough and I didn't do this right and I didn't do that right. So whenever you start to hear that voice, personalize it. Make it a person, give it a name. You'd say, well, that's crazy Uncle George. Experience it as a thing rather than as a truth. Some absolute truth that I think, okay, I have to go by this. And when you do that, the power of that gradually diminishes over time. When you're just saying to Uncle George, look, I don't have time for you today. I got to get this done by a certain amount of time, so I don't have time to listen to you, pay any attention to you. See it from outside of you. Tell them to get lost. Then maybe a last thing you can try is to celebrate the effort, not just the outcome. It's very hard. It's never easy to try your hardest at something, to feel like you gave it your best effort. Now, change is possible when we really work at it. But I learned, for example, with my kids, and probably more so even with my grandkids, I watch them at a soccer game and they lose. And they always feel like winning is more fun than losing. That's understandable. But if we walk off the field, I'm not going to say to them, man, you really sucked today at that. You missed this pass here and you had a chance to shoot for that goal. I mean, I'm going to have them giving up soccer if I talk like that. I'm going to say, hey, I'm proud of you, man. You played hard today. I could see you out there. You were hustling. You gave it everything. I know it's more fun to win, but, you can feel good about the effort you put in. I want to try to encourage them, so why don't you encourage yourself by celebrating the effort, not just the outcome? So when we talk about working at it, to change this, it just takes some time, takes some patience, takes the right support, perhaps from a counselor, to help you work on it. And kind of a last thought along this line is it takes some self-compassion. It takes some building self-compassion. Perfectionists aren't good at that. That's not one of their strong points, but it's a powerful antidote to the self-criticism. Dr. Christian Neff has wrote about 3 core components of self-compassion. So I thought they were pretty good. Let me give them to you. One is self-kindness. Kind people are warm. They're people you like to be around. So think of it, like a close friend who is struggling. What would you say to them? How would you try to encourage them? Well, just do the same thing for yourself. Secondly, realize you're part of a common humanity, that nobody is perfect. We're all imperfect. And when the difficulties come and the disappointments come and I feel less than perfect, really just realize, hey, that's humanity. That's life. You're not the only broken one in life. You're not the only one who's ever made a mistake. Everybody makes mistakes. Everybody does things wrong at some time or another. Just accept being a human. And the third thing is mindfulness. That's the ability to hold painful thoughts in a balanced awareness, where you don't get down on yourself. You don't feel like throwing in the towel. You just say, okay, this is how I'm feeling right now. I'm going to be in the moment. I'm feeling like this because of this, but what can I learn from it? Rather than being swept away by the negative thoughts. See, self-compassion is oftentimes confused with self-esteem, but they're actually different. Self-esteem says, I feel good about myself because I performed well. Self-compassion says, I can treat myself with kindness regardless of how I performed. One depends on the results and the other doesn't. Now, I know I can hear somebody out there, some perfectionist, some high performance person saying, that's just a bunch of gobbledygook, that compassion stuff. That's just an excuse for failing. That's for losers. Pointless to think like that. You think like that, you're never going to win in life. Well, if you think like that, you're probably in the perfectionist trap. Of course, we like to win, but there's nothing wrong with also being kind to yourself when things just don't turn out sometimes. It just takes practice when you're going to show some compassion towards yourself. Pause when you're struggling. Name what's really hard for you. Remind yourself that others feel that way too. Ask what you would say to a close friend in this same situation, and then say it to yourself. And journal. Journal from the viewpoint of a compassionate observer, someone outside you, and just write out, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? And faith is part of your journey, your healing journey. Here's a great scripture for you, Romans 8:1. There is therefore now no condemnation to those who are in Christ Jesus. In other words, when you become a part of God's family, God has no condemnation for you. He never condemns his own kids. You can be set free from that. He provides the perfection for us. He sees us the same way as he sees his son. And so stop judging yourself so harshly on everything. And realize self-compassion doesn't undermine motivation. Rather, it restores it, because I'm redirecting my energy away from self-punishment to something that's going to be more useful instead. Well, I hope some of these thoughts will be helpful to you as you overcome that perfectionist trap and the issues that creates in your life. And so this is Dr. John Sr. saying goodbye until we see you again soon in our next Design for Living broadcast. Goodbye and have a great day.